In 1845, James Marion Sims began conducting gynecology studies on enslaved black women without anesthesia. In 1932, the goal of the Tuskegee syphilis experiment was to observe untreated cases of syphilis, but the African American subjects were given a placebo and told they were being treated for bad blood. In 1951, Henrietta Lacks's cancer cells were taken and used for research purposes without her consent. These are just 3 of the many ways black bodies have been misused and mistreated, supposedly for the greater good. Understandably so, the black community is mistrusting of the medical and health sphere in general. So when unethical treatment occurs, who investigates these cases? Who speaks up and represents black people who have no advocates? And most importantly, how do we prevent history from repeating itself?
I had to join the NAACP to make sure that I was doing my part advocating for those who look like me.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of The Scene in STEAM. My guest today is Peris Munene.
Hello, hi Jay.
Hi Peris, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the show.
I'm so honored to be here. Let's talk about that.
So Peris, you are a junior pre-law major, international business minor, correct? And you're killing it. You're president of NAACP at Oakwood. You're on our school's leadership board. You've already taken the LSAT, killed it. I truly believe you were meant to be like a leader in politics, leader in law. And that is so crazy to me because you were telling me that you were initially on the pre-med track.
I was.
And that's insane. So what led you to that like complete switch from pre-med to pre-law?
Right, they're not similar at all. So I was going to be pre-med. I was going to be a neuropathologist. I had my goals mapped out. I had it already. And it was actually my senior year of high school. I'd already applied to Oakwood. I'd already gotten, my major was biomedical sciences. I'd have everything in order. But it was my senior year, the last semester, and I was taking it was like American history or American government class. And a part of it was like criminal system, like the criminal procedure essentially. And we had to have a mock trial. And I was chosen to be one of the attorneys for for the prosecutor essentially. I fell in love with law in that moment. So it was while prepping for the case and essentially just learning more about how law works, I realized I have an affinity to it, as in my mind can think more in those areas than I did in my science classes. At the same time, I was taking anatomy and physiology, and man, I was making it. But it was harder for me to grasp.
Right.
So that's when I was definitely like praying on it, and it was very clear, like, you're doing law. So you're gonna have to pack up all your plans, all your dreams and aspirations to be a neuropathologist, and essentially just trust me as in God and trust me to essentially lead you in the way of law. So yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So, pre-law, we do talk about how they do have their differences, but I feel like they do have their intersections in a way. And, with unethical trials in the past, like the Tuskegee syphilis experiments and everything that happened with HeLa cells and those experiments. And, you just hear constantly stories of unethical treatment of minorities, of black people in healthcare. Do you think that the law has changed over the years to protect minorities? And if not, what are we kind of doing now to like bring about that change?
Okay. I don't know if the law has changed. I know when looking into it, essentially the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Title 6 of it, essentially Article 6 of it, there is protection for people not to be discriminated by race, color, age, gender, when it comes to medical treatment or medical procedure, essentially. And so under that article, or under that Title 6, you have the protection to essentially sue a hospital or sue a medical personnel if you feel like you've been treated unfairly. However, that's 1964. We're very much currently in 2022. And when looking into it, that was the most recent and the most used legislature, essentially protecting people of color. And so when looking into things like currently, you were saying how minorities, especially like you hear about like black women, especially in childbirth, their mortality rate is very different compared to their white counterparts. And so the protection is still there, right? So you now have a voice that you didn't have prior to 1964, and obviously as more cases come along, there is more precedent on overlaying the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So that would be the protections that you currently have. I think it's a matter of just fighting for it, and I think a lot of the time, people of color especially don't have the resources to hire an attorney to say, oh, I would like to see this hospital for essentially I had terrible treatment. Somebody is expensive, right? It takes a long time, and so because of it is not necessarily that easy, it's not as common. But you do have protections under that, and I believe that should be known. Like as you see these things unfolding, as you see discrimination present in the medical field as well, you do have protection against it. You should essentially be cognizant of that.
Yeah. You talked about it is hard to get an attorney, or sometimes pay for an attorney. Are there systems in place in which someone who is facing trouble in healthcare, or facing what they would think of unfair treatment, to get an attorney, or ways to find it where they don't have those resources?
So yeah, I mean, attorneys do pro bono work. So essentially, you can ask attorneys in your area, hey, I have this case and I really need some help.
Right.
Especially, well, what I've heard is essentially like law schools, they have externships with attorneys, and essentially the attorneys will have pro bono cases to work with law students. Obviously, the attorney is the lead on the case. They're the ones working the case, but they have the assistance of law students at the same time to help with those pro bono cases. However, that would probably be your best bet, just kind of contacting a bunch of attorneys like, hey, I need help, hey, I need help, hey, I need help. And I'm sure somebody would get back to you, considering it as a suit. So, yeah.
Got you. So, you know so much about law. You're so good at it. You're so good at leading. And so, you talked about how, you still have interest in the body, and you did have those interests, but law was more your focus and where you really excelled. But do you think a STEM major, myself or another STEM major, could benefit from being knowledgeable about the law, or vice versa? Could a law major benefit from having previous STEM knowledge? Is there an intersection where those connect?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very much so, yes. Talking about, well, let's say a med student, you will have to know law, essentially what protects you as a doctor when it comes to the court of law, because clients or patients will try to sue you, right? There's medical malpractice or things like that. However, so you need to know laws that essentially give you leeway in your practice. Like there's a Samaritan clause. Have you heard about that before? It's essentially like the Good Samaritan clause.
Yes.
You've heard about that, right? So that's technically law. That's law that says, hey, if you are trying to help somebody, and in that effort of trying to help them, they do pass away, you're not going to be held liable.
Right.
Generally speaking, let me not try to quote law. And so as a pre-law major, if you're interested in the legal career, if you're taking science or engineering, you're able to become a patent lawyer. If you take science and engineering in your undergrad and then you go to law school, you now have essentially a leg up compared to other attorneys in doing patent law, because you have to have those two in your bag, essentially, to become a patent attorney. So definitely, also just, you don't know the type of law you're going to do. And so let's say you're dealing with a personal injury and they hurt their leg. I would like you to know a bit about anatomy to know what part of their leg is hurt when you're trying to argue somebody's case. So absolutely, I think the two can coexist and should coexist in some capacity.
That's awesome. And I agree, it's, as, health professionals, as, any aspect of STEM, you have to look out for, am I doing things ethically? Is this right? Am I going to get sued for this?
Yes.
So, I always tell you, you're going to be my attorney as soon as I become a physician, 100%.
I'm sorry, I got you.
Peris, people are giving me trouble. Please tell me my rights. But as technology has improved, and we've seen advances in STEM, we've also seen, I feel like the law changed a little bit. I don't know if you would agree, but in instances of police brutality, that's one instance where I feel like things that maybe would have normally been swept under the rug have come to light because of the advances that we have made. Do you think technology has changed the law in any way other than that, or made any difference there as well?
Yes, I do. So if you talk to most attorneys, they'll talk about how the legal field is archaic, right? They still use typewriter for their, essentially, it's very slow. The law is very slow to change, right? And so in the age of COVID, they finally started doing virtual court, which was something that should have started years ago once the technology was available. And so I definitely do think technology has helped with accountability, like you were saying, with police brutality. Ironically, I was also working a case this summer when I was doing my internship, and we didn't know that the officer had body cam on. And so it's not until later on we're looking at the body footage, we're like, this isn't matching the report that we got, right? So had we not had that body cam footage, we would have just essentially taken the officer's word for it. Not saying that you shouldn't, but definitely having some accountability to your word is very, very helpful, considering the history of how minorities have been mistreated by the legal system and by, obviously, police. So yes, technology has definitely changed the game. I know there's currently some states that are trying to mitigate the effects of technology. They're essentially saying body cam footage doesn't have to be released, or it can only be released during like exigent circumstances, which is, people are trying to essentially already try to cover it up or lower its power, which means that it is effective and it is doing its job. So technology, I believe as we're progressing in technology, there will be a lot more essentially accountability and accessibility in the field of law.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. So when things like that come up and people fighting against technology and saying, oh, maybe you don't have to use body cams, are there systems in place that you can fight against that? Like, no, we need to see this footage, or it's like in our rights to see this footage?
So a lot of it, okay, I'll say as of right now, it's a lot more political, right? So it's like, it's a lot more, one attorney will bring it up, like, and then it'll just go up the ranks, right? So you go through your appellate court, you go through the Supreme Court, essentially, and the Supreme Court would make the final call, essentially. Systems in place essentially just fighting against it, being like, hey, no, I'm kind of protected under these rights. So you can say according to the Constitution, right, like you're allotted a fair trial, and you could say not having that footage would essentially affect due process. And so you can argue that as you're going through the ranks, but essentially you just have to keep fighting for it however many years it takes, because again, it's very slow. Like laws, you watch on TV and it's like, we had our court finished and the jury came out within a week, and that's not how it is at all. That is not how it works. But as it keeps going through the courts, and essentially as precedents are made, those become law and especially if the Supreme Court says it's law, there's no fighting against it. So I think until it gets to that point, it'll just be based off precedent or based off what the last court said, just talking about technology.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing. Thank you, Peris, for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I had to, absolutely. You guys can follow Peris at Peris_France on Instagram. Her Instagram information will be in the bio below. And Peris, I know you're going to be an amazing lawyer. I cannot wait to see what you're going to do. I can't wait to see what your practice is going to look like. It's going to be amazing. You teach me so much every time we talk. So
well, I'm so excited for xxSTEAM, the brand, just grow.
Yes,
and
girl.
obviously you as a doctor, super excited to see what it's going to look like. You're amazing. And I tell you this every single time I see you. You never see so amazing. Like, you are so phenomenal in your drive.
Oh.
Top tier.
I think we just feed each other's like amazingness, and
that's it.
Women supporting women. I'm glad to see it. All right, Peris, thank you so much.
Thank you.